Thanks for tuning in to more fantasy football talk on the Ourlads Football Network. It's OFN Dynasty with RotoWire.com. John McKechnie from RotoWire.com joining me as we've changed the format. Took a week off to kind of, brainstorm on some other ways to throw out some additional information in the fantasy world that we feel would be beneficial to not only dynasty owners, but fantasy owners in general. So, John, how's it been going?
Going great. Busy. We're into full swing. Mid-season is almost here. We're into October, so we got a month in the books already. It's amazing. It's gone by this quickly, and yeah, feeling good. Excited for week 5 here.
Yeah, and it starts in a few hours. We're recording this in the afternoon on Thursday. A big game, LA and Seattle later tonight. We'll talk a little bit about. Well, there's the one injury that could affect the game in that one, which is the Alex Collins situation and whether or not he's somebody that could be in action for fantasy owners. It's interesting when you do these Thursday kind of deals. It's a lot better than if it's a Monday, that's for sure. But on a Thursday, Chris Carson, has there been any updates yet?
Yeah, with Carson, I know that he's dealing with that neck issue. I know that he was limited earlier in the week. I'm not sure if he's going to be really able to go Thursday night. We'll know for sure 90 minutes before kick, one way or the other. But yeah, as it stands right now, he is questionable for tonight's game. And if he ends up sitting out, short week, there's a pretty good, especially with how physical that position is. And how well
True.
Collins played a week ago, that Seattle would be justified in sitting Carson, let him get a little healthier, give him the longer layoff, and then just kind of see what they've got in Collins.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see if that, especially, and look, the only thing is it's not so easy. All right, I have Collins and I'm going to start him. Just keep in mind you're starting him up against the Rams, so it's and I've got Seattle Seahawks players on both of my fantasy team. I have Russell Wilson, Lockett, Metcalf. I'm not really interested in this week. I mean, of course, I'm starting Lockett and Metcalf because I'm always going to start them. But Russell Wilson, I'm telling you, if I have some other options, I'm thinking of other options because Russell's had bad games against the Ram defense.
That's true. In the Rams defense, it looks like it hasn't dropped off a ton from a year ago. Despite Brandon Staley leaving, obviously they got gashed a little bit last week by Arizona. Arizona's playing at a different level, obviously, than Seattle is right now, though. So you got to be kind of quarterback rich to bench Russell Wilson, but Wilson at the same time hasn't been the Russ of old, at least thus far this year.
Okay, let's get started now, and we're starting with the start-sit section of the show, and the first group of players are running backs. Now, it's interesting that each one of these guys, Hubbard, Madison, Perine, and Williams, are all there because of injuries. So, now out of that list, the clear guy today is undoubtedly Damian Williams because Montgomery's not playing. Williams has practiced, and his injury issue seems to be not an issue. So he's definitely going to play. The other guys, who knows? But again, just like I said with Collins, just because they're going to play doesn't mean you should start them. So what about this list?
Starting it out with Damian Williams. I think that he is the class of this group, like you mentioned. I like Khalil Herbert, but I don't know if necessarily he's
too early.
Someone that's necessarily we're gonna have to wait and see on him. And what I think with the nature of Montgomery's injury, we will have time over the course of these next couple of weeks to really get the sense. But yeah, Damon Williams, the priority guy to pick up this week. I don't know if he fetched quite as much as what Hubbard did last waiver wire cycle, but Williams is a lot more established. He's not super established, but more so than Hubbard was, of course. Hubbard didn't obviously have the great game a week ago against Dallas or anything. But yeah, Williams going up against Vegas. they're going to be on the road. I think they're going to lean on the ground game a little bit, try to take some of the pressure off of Justin Fields in this one. So yeah, Williams to me is someone that you're starting pretty confidently at that.
And you mentioned Herbert, and that's why I picked Herbert up in our dynasty league. And it wasn't because I'm starting him unless I absolutely have to, but it's because of the future. And I talked about this in the beginning of the season when we went over some potential long-term middle to late round picks. He was a guy we talked about, and I like Herbert. I think he could have a good career in the NFL, but we have to wait and see when he gets his chance, because I actually think in the long run he would end up like, let's just say if this was the week 1 and Montgomery was lost for the year, I would feel pretty confident by the end of the year Herbert would end up the better running back to Damian Williams, because I just think Damian Williams is just running back. I don't think he's anything special. He played with the Chiefs, the high-powered offense, and he was okay. He wasn't great. He was just okay. And now he's with the Bears, and their offensive line is not very good. So I would opt for the more, the running back with a lot more value, long-term value. But again, that's for the dynasty league, and that's primarily what we're doing here. As we move on to Samaji Perine, this is just all about whether or not, of course, Mixon's healthy. It doesn't look like Mixon's going to play, but you never know. It's possible. He's a tough guy. If Perine winds up playing, do you start him?
I think I just don't think that Perine is all that talented. So even if he were to like kind of assume some semblance of Joe Mixon's workload on Sunday against the Packers, I just don't really see him being able to produce much with it. So
like what, 60 yards, and then maybe if you get a touchdown, like a short yardage touchdown, then you're lucky and you're in a good spot. But other than if you don't get a touchdown, forget it.
Static at that. Right. Very touchdown dependent. I think that's the right way of framing it. So yeah, I mean, he's a guy who's probably not going to be ripping off more than 3.5 yards a carry. He just doesn't really have that explosiveness, at least in the NFL. I don't think he's going to get the targets that Mixon got. So he's someone that I didn't actively pursue. I would understand it if you are a manager that has Mixon, then you want to go grab his backup. But I wouldn't feel particularly confident about Perine's projection this week if Mixon is out.
Now, Madison, what's interesting about what I found out with Madison is he seems to actually be a little bit better when it's in short, like if you can start him a week or two and that's it. And then also he seems to be better when he's getting more carries in a game. It's kind of weird. It's like it's kind of a couple different dimensions I have with him, is that I don't think he's a guy that you could be a really top end workhorse 17 game guy, but I think he proves that he's a good short term spot start kind of guy. And if Cook doesn't play, then definitely I have no problem starting Madison if he goes up against the Detroit Lions defense, that's for sure. But the question is, will Cook play? And right now it's looking like Cook will probably play.
Right. So therein lies the rub. If Cook's out there, then I don't think that Madison's someone that you feel very good about starting. I think you bring some good points about, his projection week to week and how it changes based on Cook's status. I think that this could be a backfield that's a little bit in trouble just in general. You have Cook probably at less than 100% but still getting work, and that prevents Madison from getting into that rhythm that you mentioned. So even if Cook's active, then I don't feel good about starting Madison this week. If Cook is obviously inactive, then I think Madison becomes a like mid to low RB2. I think that he's solid, but probably not spectacular. But I think the matchup kind of helps his overall projection this week with it going up against the Lions at home.
Now, Detroit's better this year a little bit, or at least it looks like it. But I think they were the opponent last year when both Cook and Madison had like huge games. It's like Cook, like they killed him. And then so Madison came in the second half and he also ended up with like 100 yards. So I don't, you don't want to risk that type of scenario all the time. If you have to, okay. Maybe you have to. It's not a bad, terrible idea if you have to. Hubbard, he looked like a definite on Monday, And now all of a sudden, thank goodness, since I have McCaffrey on my dynasty team, it's like, where'd this come from? McCaffrey's actually practicing.
Yeah, that's a quick bounce back for McCaffrey. He's obviously a guy that can bounce back from that kind of stuff, I guess. Although it did take him a long time to battle through his injuries a year ago, and it's a hamstring, and there's so much riding on him for Carolina that the last thing you would want to do is rush him back. So even if he practices this week, I would still imagine that he sits out. My big thing is that Carolina might start to exercise its other options in the backfield, maybe see a little bit more of what it has in a Royce Freeman or even a Rodney Smith this week. So I'm a little bit worried that Hubbard doesn't have the projected monopoly on this backfield the way that a lot of people were hoping that he would, where
even if McCaffrey doesn't play.
Right. Because, last year Mike Davis just kind of one-to-one picked up all of that volume. I don't think that the Panthers are comfortable giving Hubbard that type of role. It doesn't feel that way. I mean, 13 carries a week ago, he was effective with those carries for the most part, well over 4 yards a carry, but no touchdowns, caught both his targets. Like, he was fine, but like, he wasn't someone that like you need to absolutely like bend over backwards to keep on the field. Like, you can keep mixing and matching and getting your Rodney Smiths or your Royce Freemans in there. So Hubbard to me is more like a flex consideration than someone you feel good about as your RB2. Obviously, if you have Hubbard and you're someone that picked him up, you probably spent a lot of your free agent budget on him in all likelihood. So you feel maybe a little bit more compelled to start him. But I wouldn't say just in a vacuum that this is necessarily a great week to start Hubbard.
And that's the reason why I didn't pick him up after I had McCaffrey. I had the option. I wasn't sure whether Hubbard is the guy that I was, okay, McCaffrey's hurt. Now I've got Hubbard, especially since McCaffrey's young. If he was a little older and I was thinking about the future in my dynasty league, that'd be different. But McCaffrey's he's got a long way to go. And I just, again, if you get him at the right spot, great. But someone picked him up before he got to that area that I felt that it was the right spot for me. Okay, let's move on to the next grouping. And that is the receivers here. And we have three of these guys, starting with A.J. Brown. And A.J. Brown being the big boy who did not play last week. And it's looking like it's possible that he's going to play. Forget about Julio Jones. He'll miss another week. But A.J. Brown, if he plays, he'll get a lot more attention maybe now without Julio Jones. So what about starting A.J. Brown? That's definite, of course, just about whether or not he's healthy.
Right. So, he did a limited practice on Wednesday. We'll see what things look like the rest of the week. I imagine he'll just kind of be limited the rest of the week. I doubt he'll do a full practice here over these next couple of days. If he plays, then I think you have to start him. I know it's a dicey situation, a guy with injury history already, it seems like, and then get this being a hamstring issue, not related to the knee issues that he's had previously, still a bit of a concern. I just think that it's very obvious from the way that the Titans lost to the Jets a week ago. They need somebody out there. They envision this offense being a lot more dynamic this year with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones being out there. If Jones is still out there, I think maybe Brown puts a little more pressure on himself to get out there. If he's active Sunday, I think you have to start him. I wouldn't be. You'd have to be really, really loaded at receiver, yes, I think, to consider leaving Brown on your bench if he's active, especially against the Jaguars. Yeah,
because he's at that level of stardom that you play him if he plays. As far as Allen Robinson, that's a different story. So what about Allen Robinson, who has a rookie quarterback out there this week? Last week looked like Darnell Mooney was Josh Fields' top target. Allen Robinson, start or sit?
So I think you do still start Robinson. I think by this point, I'm not breaking any new ground here by saying that your expectations for what you're getting out of Robinson are definitely tempered. Maybe there's a chance that someone that you picked later in your draft has a better projection this week, in which case I wouldn't fault anyone for benching Robinson. I just think for me, he still falls in that top 36 range at his position. So with that in mind, that's assuming starting three receivers in a 12-team league. I still think that Robinson is start worthy, but I can understand the case for benching him just because this. I'm not necessarily worried that Mooney becomes that new number one guy. I just think that this offense is in a nefarious position, and I think despite the fact that they showed life against the Lions last week, it doesn't erase the fact that they were held to 46 yards against the Browns. I think, maybe the truth lies somewhere in between those two performances.
Yeah, and then you have to think that more than likely it'll be every other week. Maybe Robinson will end up being the guy, and Mooney will be the guy, and that's just not because especially you never know with these young quarterbacks. The young quarterbacks sometimes gravitate to younger players sometimes for whatever the reason, especially if they're in their same class. That's not where Mooney is, but we don't know. If it happens a second week and Mooney actually outstats Allen Robinson, then we've got something to think about in the long term. But it was only 1 week. Still, the fact is it's a risky play when you have a rookie out there like Fields in this scenario. Okay, and then you have Cadarius Tony, who finally was able to showcase his talents last week because of injuries. Giants had a bunch of injuries. Tony got his chance, had a really solid game. It wasn't 6 for 150 and 2 touchdowns, but where he was to what the game did for him was like night and day.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was. I mean, he had been among the healthy rookie first rounders, one of the more invisible first rounders from this class, but obviously gets in the fold last week in light of Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton being injured, and he goes ahead. I mean, John Ross did something last week. It was a very crazy week as far as the Giants and their pass catchers were concerned. I'm seeing a lot of red on the injury report for the Giants this week heading into Sunday. Slayton and Shepard remain questionable. Golladay popping up on the injury report as well. And I think Tony did well enough last week to where he's probably warranting a role. I don't know if it will be as big as it was a week ago if those 3 guys are active, but there's a chance that at least one of them is inactive, in which case, we could see Tony push for 40, 45 snaps once again, like he's done over the last 2 weeks. And I think he starts to capitalize. I think last week was a big step in his development and a big step in the maturation of his relationship with Daniel Jones. So I don't know if I'm starting Tony necessarily. I don't feel that confident about it, but I think that he's someone that's obviously rosterable at this point in season long and of course in dynasty. And I think he's knocking on the door of being start worthy, but I'd still hope that I have a better option than him or someone that I trust a little bit more heading into week 5.
Yeah, he's a start if you have to, but if you have to, it's at least you still feel okay. You're like, all right, I think I got a chance to get something out of him, because you would expect the Cowboy Giant game could be in the 20s, 30, 24 type of game. And so there'll be some offensive output and to go around. Okay, now let's go to the next part, which is I'm going to bring up a couple of players for you to choose from on a weekly basis. And so basically this is a decision time for you. Let's talk about the quarterbacks first, and it's in the same game. So Ryan Tannehill versus Trevor Lawrence.
This is a good one. These guys are both kind of fighting to get back into that QB1 range for fantasy. I just think the Jags are so bad that I have to give the lean to Tannehill, especially if A.J. Brown is back. I think that's
the one. Yeah.
Yeah, that just kind of carries it for me. Like as much as I like Trevor Lawrence and as good as I think he's going to be, and he's starting to show signs, and as bad as I think the Titans are, the Jags are just a dumpster fire, and I think Tannehill takes advantage this week. Okay. I think the Titans could hang a big number on them.
And keep in mind, of course, DJ Shark's out, and that's a big blow as well. Sure. And next up, is going to be quarterbacks. We'll stick with quarterbacks. And this used to be a New York battle. Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones. So Sam Darnold finally stepped up in competition last week, and it showed. He didn't have his best game. He had no McCaffrey. And I've just been very surprised that he has shown absolutely no chemistry with Robbie Anderson. Nothing. That surprises me. But Daniel Jones broke out in a big way. But again, as you mentioned, there were some injury concerns at receiver. And even though he had injury concerns at receiver last week, Daniel Jones still had a really good game.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, two very interesting guys to bring up here. I think I got to lean with Darnold. He's going home. I know Daniel Jones has actually been pretty good on the road, but Darnold, he's getting that rushing production, especially with McCaffrey out.
That's crazy.
He's got what, 5? Yeah, he's got more rushing touchdowns than Lamar Jackson by like a lot. Yeah. So I go Darnold. He I know he's not clicking with Robbie Anderson, but he's really clicking with DJ Moore. So I think that things are trending up for him. I don't think that Philadelphia's defense, especially in the secondary, is all that. No. So give me Darnold. Yeah. Give me Darnold this week.
Back-to-back 40-plus outings for the Philly defense. Not good. All right, next up, we're going to go back to the Jags, and we've got a Jag wide receiver contest. Marvin Jones Jr. versus Laviska Shenault with DJ Shark on the shelf.
I think what we saw last week with Shenault getting more involved in light of Chark's absence, I think that was pretty telling. I don't know if it's necessarily super damning of Marvin Jones the rest of the way, at least. I hope it isn't. But I think in the short term, we're going to start to see Shenault get a little bit more involved in this offense. And I think he's got a little bit more explosiveness to his game at this stage than Jones might. So I would take Shenault. And I think that, there's that chance, especially if you're in PPR format, Shenault runs those shallower routes where Lawrence maybe looks to him a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, and again, like I said, sometimes the younger quarterback with the younger receiver, I think it is time for Lawrence to start to develop a long-term relationship with Shenault. Okay, next up, we have a Jet matchup. And I think this is really interesting for a few reasons. It's Jameson, Crowder, and Corey Davis. Now, Corey Davis had the big week last week against his former team. Crowder came back last week and had a really good week. The security blanket kind of guy. What makes this interesting also is that Atlanta looks like they're going to be going to the rookie in the slot, Avery Williams. Spoke with Kevin Knight, our dynasty fantasy undefeated mastermind, yesterday for the Jet Falcon game. And that's what he told me. He says there's an injury in the slot. Avery Williams is possibly going to be the guy that will man that position. If that's the case, that's a big edge for Crowder. But because Corey Davis does have to go up against A.J. Terrell more than likely, and he's clearly their number one corner. But Corey Davis is still the big play guy for the Jets and Zach Wilson. So which way do you go?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting detail in the slot when it comes to Crowder and his projection for this week. But I think Davis in both standard and PPR would be my lean. I still think that he has the bigger role overall. He's someone that Wilson trusts downfield, and I think that also Atlanta is not going to be able to generate that much of a pass rush. And we saw what happened last week. When you don't get in Wilson's face, he can make plays happen. Yes. So I think that will be the case again this week, and I think we're going to see Davis continue to have some success here. So maybe the Jets and Wilson turning a corner after looking pretty tough those first 3 weeks.
All right, and then the last contest is a tight end between Dalton Schultz and George Kittle. Now, beginning of the season, you're going, what are you? It's laughter. I hear laughter. But George Kittle's been banged up. And Dalton Schultz is coming on. I'm a Dalton Schultz fan. I liked him at Stanford. I thought he had a shot in the NFL, and then he just disappeared for a year and a half or so. But now he's starting to come on. And that high-powered Dallas offense, he seems to be good for 6 catches and maybe a touchdown every week if they're playing the right opponent. This week they're playing the right opponent, and George Kittle is still banged up. So I think this is an interesting matchup.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And yeah, the way that Kittle has kind of failed to live up to that draft capital so far, it makes this a legitimate discussion. I guess my problem is that I think that there's just too many other mouths to feed in Dallas. I think that you not only have Zeke and Tony Pollard coming out of the backfield, and then CeeDee Lamb and Cooper,
Sure.
but you have Schultz, and then you have like Blake Jarwin as well. I mean, like he might not even be the right tight end on
Yeah,
the Cowboys this week.
yeah.
So I just think that you're really making it tough to thread the needle when you play a guy like Schultz over Kittle. Kittle, of course, like we said, has been a disappointment, and you're turning the rookie quarterback and Trey Lance out there. But I think that almost might goose Kittle's production this week because Kittle's going to be that security blanket over the middle and in that short and intermediate part of the field. So I think it's definitely an interesting discussion, but at the same time, I think that Kittle wins out here.
And keep in mind too, if you look back at the history when Jimmy G's been injured, Kittle has had big games. So it's not that Kittle is only producing when it's Jimmy G. He's had big games with non-starting quarterbacks. So with a young quarterback like Lance, this could definitely occur. Last question is regarding Cordarrelle Patterson, and that is whether or not you believe Cordarrelle Patterson, whether you have him or whether you don't and you need a running back / receiver. Would you consider trading him now? Would you consider, well, this is the highest, part that I think Cordarrelle Patterson is ever going to be. There's no way he's going to keep this up. I'm going to try and, throw him off on someone and steal, a good trade back. And then on the flip side, how confident are you that he keeps this up?
Yeah, it's tricky to sell high on Patterson because he's such like a high profile player, only like among fantasy players, right? Like everyone knows who he is, and everyone is kind of like has had or has been allured by Patterson in the past. His kick return ability, his big play ability, it's electrifying. So now he finally has this role in an offense where it feels like he's finally being used correctly, but it also feels like it could go away in a heartbeat. So it's hard to sell high properly. You can probably sell high in like the literal sense and be like you get someone that you can start every week in exchange for Patterson, but I don't think you're gonna like pull the wool over anyone's eyes. I think everyone is pretty aware that this could go away at any time. So
do you have not in our league, because we don't want to get anybody, the other owners listening in and thinking, oh, I can do something, but use one of your other leagues. Give me a player that you would consider trading for him.
Well, I think, if I'm looking at running back, like here's an interesting one. You like Miles Sanders or Cordarrelle Patterson?
Interesting.
Right now. Because Sanders just doesn't see Sanders is, I think, like the more classic, traditional running back, but he's not getting the work right now. And he has a quarterback that runs the ball, so that takes some carries off his plate. And Kenny Gainwell is playing well. So, like, would you do Patterson for Sanders? And I think I would think hard about that one. Like that, I think that's about the high water mark.
Not in the dynasty league, though.
No, season long.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. And we talked about him the first week, and this was before his what would he have 4 touchdowns last week?
Patterson, I think he had 3.
3? Okay. Yeah, I couldn't keep count. So even way before that, we were talking about how he was an interesting pickup early on in the season, and so far so good. Because if you didn't start him last week, I feel bad for any owner who sat him last week.
Oh man, yeah, that's brutal to have him and have him be taking up with that roster spot, and then he goes off and kind of like is a week changer.
Yes.
Yeah, tough.
All right, John. Great job. Appreciate it as always. What's going on at RotoWire? Obviously, not just fantasy. You're also working hard with the college football fantasy, NFL fantasy, college football fantasy, and the sports betting section.
Yep. So sports betting is rolling along. We got 4 or 5 sports betting articles every single week. And if you just go to rotowire.com, /betting. Click into the NFL section. We've got updated odds from multiple different sports books to help you if you're shopping lines, trying to find where the best number is. You can do that using that. We got betting tools, parlay calculators, all that good stuff. Spread over under totals for this year, the team's records in each of those against those particular bets. We got all of that there as well. And then college football, yeah, we're rolling along midseason form, of course. And then going back to the betting, we do have baseball betting for the entire MLB postseason as well. So our guys did a really good job with the wild card games, and now we're into the divisional series that starts here in about half an hour, and we've got stuff up for that.
Who's the favorite in the World Series?
In the World Series, it's got to be whoever comes out of the Dodgers Giants series. That's amazing that you get a divisional series between a 106 game winner and a 107 game winner, and the 106 game winner took until the 9th inning last night to come out on top against the Cardinals. So pretty amazing stuff. Strong West Coast baseball being played right now.
All right, sounds good. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll be back next week. We'll have a special guest in the next week or two. Kevin Knight, who I mentioned, will be with us. So I told Kevin, we're just waiting for him to lose before we have him on as a guest. So appreciate it as always, John. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks again, Greg.